Hello and welcome back to Stephencministries. It's really good to have you here. Today I had the privilege of sitting down with Patrick. Patrick and I spoke about a lot of things. We spoke about the New Age, manifestation, being a digital nomad, pickup artistry, philosophy, and why he became a Roman Catholic. This episode really has it all. As always, have your Bible open. Judge everything that I say, everything that guest says by the standard that is in Scripture. I know with Patrick being a Roman Catholic, with I myself being a Baptist, we're not going to agree on absolutely everything. But I think that discussions like this within the Christian faith and within the various traditions within the Christian faith are really valuable. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks again for listening. Patrick, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and being willing to share a little bit more about your story. I'm really grateful for that and grateful for you making the time to do that. The first question that I had for you, brother, is just relating to your early life. I wanted to know whether or not you grew up in a Christian home, or is your story maybe a little bit different to some people's in that regard?
My early life is Christian, definitely. We grew up in a Protestant household. I did grow up there in Germany. I'm from Germany, by the way. And yeah, we did have all the Christian values in general in Germany as a culture, but more specifically, obviously, in the family. And we went to church like 2 times per week, even. I did regular prayers in the evening. So I would consider myself a more devoted Christian as a child than all my classmates. They really didn't. Most of them go to church once per year, and like I said, we twice per week. So that was a big difference back then. But it was fine for me because I was like, yeah, well, that's just the way it is, right? So to summarize, nothing really much happened in that regard. It was just normal for me to pray, normal for me to have a connection or to believe that there is a life after death, to believe in Jesus and all these things that were just normal for me.
That makes sense. So it sounds like was that a bit countercultural in Germany? Because like I'm assuming Germany like is pretty progressive. Is it quite secular in Germany, or were a lot of people going to church twice a week as young people? Uh, was that a typical experience
Mm,
for young Germans, would you say?
I mean, this might gonna sound funny, but like the only devoted religious people I knew were actually Muslims. So like I didn't have, as far as I know, I didn't know anyone in my class. Maybe I don't want to say anything wrong, but I just didn't know anyone in my class who went to church once per week or twice per week or something like that. Most of them went to church on Christmas, like that's or on Easter, something like 2 times per year, right? And it's definitely a very secular environment, even. Um, yeah, it's a super secular environment for sure, for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it sounds like you grew up with a pretty solid Christian base. So, what were your teenage years like? Did you kind of continue on with that trend, or did you kind of go your own way, separately from the way your parents raised you?
Mhm. I mean, the thing is, when I started to think rationally about all these things, and especially the Bible, I started to ask myself these questions, like if it's literally all true or not, because like stories like Noah and his ark or Adam and Eve, they really went contra what we learned in school. So in school, they teach you evolution, they teach you all these things, and you just take it for granted that whatever they say is true, right? So you start to really question your faith, and you're like, okay, maybe that's not true. What's written in the Bible? But you're like discounting it, like, okay, maybe this is just a fictional story, right? That part, and so maybe. But then the problem is when you start doing that, like the consequence became for me the whole book lost its significance. So it got less and less. It got more like a nice tales, tales for humanity. They're good tales, and then also Jesus at the end of the day became then more a tale than actual reality, which was like the consequence I took from there. So I guess I really started to doubt. And I also had the problem that I didn't really have someone who really answered me those questions in a way that I was like satisfied. It was more like, yeah, we don't know about it. It could be a tale, it could have been true. I don't know. We don't know, right? So I was like, okay, they don't know. And once I started to lose a little bit the respect of the, let's say, the more mature people in the faith, I was like, how is it possible that I, in my teenage years, I question all these things and these people don't question it? I just blindly believe. And I started to really build this resentment against blindly believing people. And I felt like it's kind of a stupid thing to do to blindly believe. Yeah. That was a trend that started in my teenage years.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying. Struggling to figure out what parts of the Bible are symbolic. Like there are parts of the Bible that are symbolic that I think are pretty uncontroversial, like Revelation and so on. But exactly how we figure out those things can sometimes be difficult. And I'm glad that you bring that up because I think that's a problem that a lot of people have with Christianity. And I'm kind of keen to hear about how you reconcile those things ultimately later on in your testimony. But another thing that I kind of wanted to pick up on that I was also interested in my teenage years is you mentioned kind of seeking after girls and getting into pickup culture and stuff like that. And that
Hmm.
was a part of my story. I remember when I was a teenager finding these guys on YouTube and kind of getting interested in that. And ultimately coming away now as a Christian, a lot of that is at sort of at odds with my values. Um, but
Sure.
yeah, how did that happen for you? What did that look like?
Mm, at the age of 17, roughly, my parents separated and my mom left the household. So we also stopped going to church at the same time, and the whole construct of the faith anyway crumbled. Then it all just came together. So when this whole construct of faith like stumbled or failed, let's just say, I started to look for like other ways to do good in life, and I realized like if I want to do good in life, I need like a good woman. I need like much money and all these things. So I focused on these worldly goals. And the fastest way for me to get the validation and to feel appreciated again in the world and to feel good in the world was then girls. And I do believe now that it was also partly because I had this wound of my mom leaving the household. So I was like filling this wound, this void with like other girls' attention. So there was like a time where I went to the gym. I started to really lift weights really good, so to get a nice body and just to pick up girls basically, right? Um, then I realized that doesn't really help. I need to know how to actually, pursue a woman, and all these topics. And it's really interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, like in the beginning, you learn some things and sometimes they work because they're based on like deep psychology stuff. And you don't really realize what you're doing in the big picture. You don't really realize that you're like building this mask, this lie, that you're like being deceptive. You're just thinking that this is just part of becoming a man. Part of becoming a man means you learn how to conquer a woman, and that just means you learn certain techniques that a man has to conquer. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely I can. I mean, I think that was a big part of it for me. Um, I think a lot of young men, like you mentioned, validation and conquering, and it can be seen as like this kind of conquest. And obviously, my perspectives on that have changed when I've read scripture and I've seen how we're meant to treat our wives. And obviously, like the biblical sexual ethic is a little bit different to picking up as many women as you can. But yeah, certainly I can see the appeal to young men. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about doing podcasts with people that have been in those kinds of environments is to show them that deep, true fulfillment is actually found in Christ and it's found in the Christian faith. It's you're not going to find it in another girl or another experience or more money or passive income. Which kind of brings us on to our next topic. Another phase in your life that you mentioned was this idea of being a digital nomad. And I think that's something that a lot of people are interested in today. It's a really cool concept, like working from your laptop, being able to travel, have more freedom. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on how you got into that?
Sure. I mean, basically, my way is like that. Like, I like to separate life in these three categories: it's health, wealth, and relationships. And so I solved the health issue first, which was a nice body. Then I went into the relationships issues, which like with girls, and I felt like I was at a level where I mean, I felt like at a level where I was like, it wasn't really interesting for me anymore, like to get a new number of a pretty girl or a date or whatnot. So the whole kick from it, like it just left. So I was like, okay, the next thing that's like just that's still there is like wealth, right? So my main idea was just okay, if I have enough money, then I have freedom, and ultimate freedom means ultimate fulfillment, right? So I thought, okay, how can I make the ultimate freedom? And I thought about like I want location freedom, I want financial freedom, and these two things, for me, the best thing that went together was to be a digital nomad was like the best fit. I was like, wow, that's incredibly free. You can go to whatever place you want, whenever you want. Um, no one is your boss. And especially if you make enough money, like that's really awesome. So this idea really hooked me hard. I really was like really deep into it. I learned a lot of business stuff, read a lot of business books, and got courses and all these things to really understand how to make money online. And at the end of the day, I did manage to build a little company. We did a little tutoring business back then. And from that income, I was able to travel then. So I did generate my income, and it was also at some point it was starting to get more passive and passive. Of course, it was a lot like investing, and then like it started to get a little bit more passive. And then I reached like a peak, I would say, because I was living like next to the Caribbean Sea. It was just a beautiful location. I had a really nice, beautiful new apartment. Had a beautiful girlfriend at that time. And I just reached a peak where I was like, like that's it, like because I could travel now to, I don't know, Bali. I could travel to wherever I want basically. And whenever I left a place and I went to a new place, it was always this void. There was just a deep void. Like I don't know how to explain it to you better than it felt like it's more a dopamine rush than it really is a long lasting fulfillment, because the first 2 weeks in a new location, when I lived in a new location, for example, I lived a few months in Dubai, I lived in Istanbul, I lived in the Dominican Republic, I lived in Spain. And the first time you go to a new location, it's always nice, because you have new impressions. It's pretty much like consuming a new video. You get these all these impressions that are going on to you, and it's really awesome to get that culture and everything. But once you get used to the culture, you're just left with yourself. So one of our main learnings was, if I'm not fine by myself, like in a room closed with myself, then I'm not fine at all. Then it doesn't matter where I am. So I really shifted then from this whole digital nomad idea to like an internal perspective, because I realized ultimate fulfillment has to come from the inside, not from the outside,
Absolutely.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, no, it totally does. And I think you were living the dream for many people, and you still found yourself wanting more. And as far as I understand it, that's kind of where your journey kind of shifts to you pursuing spirituality. Um, so maybe you could kind of tell us a little bit about that. So you'd achieved what a lot of people would see as a great degree of earthly success, but you still found yourself wanting more. You mentioned that you couldn't be okay with yourself when you were alone in a room. So what's the point of being able to go anywhere in the world? I think that's a really profound insight. So, yeah, what did your journey into spirituality look like?
I guess it all started like with this whole internal shift that I was like, okay, I have to, look into myself and to understand myself better. Like, who am I? That's a really profound question that like really hooked me. Like someone once asked in a video something like, I saw a video that the person said, "Who are you?" And people used to answer with a very simple answer, but they actually answer a different question. They answer with their name. But if you answer with your name, you answer to the question, "What's your name?" And if you answer with your age, you answer to the question, "How old are you?" And if you answer with your hobbies, you're answering to the question, "What are your hobbies?" You're not really answering to the question, "Who are you?" Right? So who are you at the core? I could change my hobbies and I'm still the same person, right? So like I don't know, right? That doesn't really change me. I could change my looks. I'm still the same person. I'm still the same feeling of me, right? I don't know. You feel where I'm coming from. It's like I was really trying to find out what is my actual identity? Who am I really at the core? So what's the thing that's unchanging? And then I got into this whole Eckhart Tolle idea of you're just a listener of your thoughts, which is which really relieved me to understand who I am, because the only thing I felt like that's not moving is like my conscience, or my consciousness, sorry, my consciousness. So the awareness of my thoughts, the awareness of my being, that's the only constant. So then I realized, if that's the only constant, that's the only appropriate answer to the question, "Who are you?" I don't know if that makes any sense. It's a little complicated angle, but do you understand, or is that too complicated? I don't know.
No, 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 absolutely. So you were kind of getting into philosophy, and that's definitely a thing. I think, particularly like in
Yeah,
Eastern thought, they talk about it in mindfulness too. This idea that you are your consciousness, you're like the observer behind the thoughts,
exactly.
not the thought itself. Um, and I think there's some valuable insights to that too. So yeah, so you got into sort of spirituality. Ultimately, you kind of get into manifestation too. Like if you're getting into Eckhart Tolle, you're not too far away from a lot of the kind of New Age movement in general. Yeah. So what did that look like for you? How did you kind of get interested in manifestation?
I mean, for me, okay, let's take it back to the identity thing. For me to really understanding who I am was very crazy, because I felt like no one understands that. I was like walking around and I was like, no one here around us understands who they are. they think in fixed concepts, like I am this worker of this job, and they describe themselves with the job, or they have all these attachments from these different things. And so I realized these attachments are they're like, you are the one who are attracting them, let's just say, and then you make them part of your identity, but it's up to you. Like if you say I am this shy person, like in a way you're attracting shyness, and in a way you're attracting weird social behavior, because you're just reinforcing this false identity that you're giving yourself. Instead, if you would start to just say, I am not the shy person, I'm the consciousness aware of, I don't know, me being shy sometimes. That's a whole other perspective. You know where I'm coming from? Because then you can change things. And that really fascinated me to see that. I felt like I saw that everyone around me is like attracting their own life. It's like their behaviors, their habits are pretty much their attractors for their own life. And then they are stuck because they don't understand at the core that they're just consciousness who's attracting all these things. So that was, I guess, the bridge to this whole manifestation idea. And then the logical consequences, obviously, is to get rid of all these attachments, to get rid of all these concepts in order to be your true self, which is just awareness, being in the moment, and all these ideas that all go hand in hand in some way. Yeah, that was like the next stage. I don't know. You mentioned you also went into that direction, or did I get it wrong?
No, you're right. Yeah, I've been interested in philosophy for quite some time, and obviously a big question in philosophy is who are you? What do you consist of? What are you made of? And when I became a Christian, I was really interested in this idea of the soul, the idea of consciousness in general, and like the hard problem of consciousness, and kind of what, like, I believe in life after death as a Christian, obviously, but what part of me goes on? Like if my brain activity stops, but my consciousness continues, like what does that look like? Because we experience everything
Mhm.
through physical senses. So the idea that your consciousness continues after your physical senses, like, touch, smell, which are like neurological processes
Yep.
continuing, is something that's fascinated me. So I'm glad you're interested in that too, because I haven't really spoken about that at great depth in this channel, just because I haven't had somebody that's had a kind of common interest in that. But yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from, brother, and I can emphasize with some of those questions. I emphasize too with you mentioning a fear of death at one point, and I think that that's something that almost
Mm.
everybody kind of wrestles with on some level, like whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, it doesn't matter. Everybody has questions around like
Besides Christian.
everyone besides Christian. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like even yeah, Muslims have an idea that there's this Jannah, there's this place that you can go if you're an obedient Muslim, and obviously, I think Christianity has the most explanatory power in terms of what happens to us when we die and why and how that makes
Mhm.
sense. But anyway, this podcast isn't about me; it's about you. What are your thoughts around that? How did you kind of reconcile your own fear of death and so on?
I mean, I realized that fears are also just an illusion in some way. Like most of the fears that we have, they're like invisible chains that don't really make any sense. For example, like your social fears that you have, they're like completely outdated. They don't make any sense. Like I don't know, speaking out loud or whatever, right? Like we have all types of social fears. And I realized I really started on this journey of facing my fears. It's something that started already earlier when by picking up girls. Like we used to go into most awkward situations just to more like desensitize us for the fear. Like I don't know, the most awkward situation you can imagine. Like you go in the middle of a restaurant, like everyone is eating, and you're just speaking to a girl, right? Like super awkward. Or like you know what I'm saying, right? Like just stuff that's like whoa. And I really like this idea of stretching your comfort zone, because the more you stretch your comfort zone, I felt like the more free I am. That means just the more I can do more things. But while other people are comfortable in that space, I'm comfortable in that space. That just means I'm more free. And more freedom felt for me like more happiness. So I went on this whole, detachment journey plus facing my fears at the same time. So I knew at some point I'm going to have to face the fear of death. I just knew it because I knew the root of all fear. And that's actually really interesting. The root of all fear is the fear of dying. Like if you're scared to be, rejected from the society, you're just basically scared to be alone, starve and die, right? So this whole facing your fears plus getting rid of all the attachments was a very interesting development because I started to reject old concepts, in the sense of I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm just a consciousness. Okay. So I started to separate my ego from all these concepts and at the same time facing fears and overcoming them also, right? Until at some point I really had not much left from my identity because Patrick was not a I was not Patrick anymore. Patrick was just I was the listener of Patrick. I was like experiencing his life. Patrick was just a name that was giving my consciousness. It was this I was detached from all types of things that were related to me, and I felt very fluid in that regard. I like, okay, if I do this hobby, then I'm a different person. I felt like I could shape my personality the way I want, right? And at the end of this period, there was a time where I also used like marijuana to understand more about reality. I felt like my consciousness is a little bit expanding, and I can understand more things. I don't know how that worked, but I enjoyed it because I was like, yeah, I'm like downloading more truths. That's just what they always say in New Age, right? Anyway, and then I used this marijuana for like a straight week, really understanding a lot of things. But at the end of this week, I had a very scary experience because I felt like I felt like I'm awakening in some sense. I'm just dissolving. Like my identity, like the sense of self is just dissolving into the universe. It's just like I know I say I will cease to exist, okay? And I will expand into everything again, which was interestingly enough, it was a nice feeling and it was also a horrible feeling at the same time because it was kind of nice to be like connected to everything. I felt very connected in general in this whole new age area. I felt like I don't know, like when I saw you, I saw me, right? That sounds kind of weird, but I was like, you are me because at your core, you're consciousness and I am consciousness. So at the end of the day, we're the same, right? All these things that you think are your personality, they're a scam. We're pretty much the same thing. Okay, so I felt a lot of connection to all the universe and I dissolved into the universe, but that manifested itself a really huge fear also because it was the fear of my personality actually literally dying. Like the person Patrick is gonna cease and then I'm not there anymore, right? So this kind of ego death awakening, nirvana state, let's just call it, was very exciting and very scary at the same time. Um, it felt a little bit like waking up in the Matrix, to be like, okay, now I'm gonna wake up and then I'm gonna feel like everything is a scam. Everything is like everything is one and everything. I don't know. It's weird to describe even, but like everything is a simulation type of idea. Um, this experience then manifested itself into panic attacks for the following weeks. And that was a very new experience for me because till then I lived actually, I maybe had this inner void always, but I never really had like a lot of anxiety. You know, like I faced my anxiety and that was it. But that was like the first time anxiety really took over. Like, and I couldn't control it anymore. And I was not used to that. I was used to control my anxiety, go through it. But these panic attacks and the fear of dying was like a vicious cycle that you couldn't get out of because when I was scared of the panic attack, then the panic attack already started. Okay. So when I was afraid already of, so I had to be not afraid of the panic attack, which is pretty possible. So you were afraid of the panic, then it started. Then you're like, oh boy, I'm afraid it's gonna get worse. Then it's gonna get worse, right? So oh boy, I'm afraid that I'm gonna go like bibbering. Then it started bibbering. Oh boy, I'm afraid that I'm gonna go all the way heavy breathing and all the way, and then it goes there, right? Because the anxiety is like a self. I don't know. It's like you know what? It's an exponential mechanism, nearly, and I couldn't get
Absolutely.
it under control really. I really I didn't know how to like because it was just it just went up and I just couldn't I didn't know how to control it. It was like a tornado. So yeah, that's that's also where also the climax comes in of my encounter because there was one evening where I felt like it was like a 2 week period and I was already like so I was done with my forces because I was like I can't control this anymore. This is just beyond, you know, I used, I don't know, breath work. I used like, I don't know, meditative music. I did all type of things to calm myself down, but none of them really lasted. Like nothing was really helping for real for long. So there was this one evening where a panic attack emerged again. And there was an inner voice or an inner feeling. I don't remember exactly anymore if it was a voice or feeling, but it was definitely my voice or my feeling that was telling me that I should pray. And I was like, in that time of my life, I was like so far away from praying. I was like, I am God. I'm the attractor of my own life, my own reality. I am the one who manifests all these things. I manifest my panic attacks. So who should I pray to? to help me with that, because I ultimately manifest my reality. I'm consciousness. And if you say I am consciousness, you're literally saying I am God, because everything is conscious. The New Age people, they don't like to say I am God, but when they say I am consciousness, you believe that you are the manifester of everything. Literally, you are, right? So I believe, like, um, but anyway, I still had this insistence nearly of like pray, pray, pray. And I was like, I mean, I don't even know how anymore, It's been so long. It's been 10 years without praying. And I was like, I don't know. I would give it a try, of course. Why not? I can't anymore myself, so that's the last resort. So let's go there anyway. I went on my knees and next to my bed, and I started to pray and to cry at the same time, because it was the first time me really opening up to God again. Because before that, I had just tried to do it all myself. I tried to do my life all myself, and it was the first time me submitting to, like, if I said literally, I don't know if you're true. I literally don't know, but if you're true, I need your help right now. So I was submitting in a way of like, I can't anymore. I need you right now. And this prayer was really, really relieving. And he did take the anxiety from me, and the panic attack that emerged was just gone. It was like, it wasn't there anymore. And I felt like an amazing peace filling me. Like, I felt like I'm being loved. I felt like, I don't know, everything is going to be okay. There was just a profound feeling of peace that was manifesting or filling me, even, that I haven't felt in years before, because I was always chasing, right? So I could never be like in peace, right? But there was this profound peace that he then gave me. And yeah, since then, I guess I am completely hooked on God, let's say.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean that must have been a huge worldview change for you. Like I hear you talk about this idea of like all being one and being the universe experiencing itself and so on, which is a very new age concept, and it's something that I myself experienced, particularly like when I would use psychedelic drugs. I had these experiences that I couldn't even clearly articulate, and then later on, the new age kind of gave me language for what I experienced. And coming to Christ it's a huge shift, right? Because you realize that your individual self, like the part of you that is Patrick, right? Whatever Patrick is, continues on after death. You're not like completely absorbed into the universe according to like a Christian understanding of the afterlife. You still have your personality. You go to be with the Lord and you're around other Christians. You're not all like one big what would you say, like mixing pot of consciousness, right?
Mesh.
Mesh. Yeah, you're not a mesh,
True.
exactly. And for me, I like that idea. Like I prefer that idea to just being absorbed into Nirvana, or like just being part of Brahman, or whatever kind of language you want to use to describe um, other conceptions of life after death. I also obviously believe that it's true. Like I don't just believe it because it helps me with my fear of death. I think there's really good, solid evidence for believing the Bible, for believing in the
Mhm.
resurrection, and so on. Um, so yeah, as we kind of begin to wrap up, I was going to ask you what Jesus has given you that nothing good before, but it sounds like your answer might be peace. Would you say that that's been one of the main changes you've noticed in your life?
I would say by far it's peace and security for sure. It's like and actual freedom. I didn't know what actual freedom meant before. I thought actual freedom meant I am consciousness and I attract everything in myself. But I realized actual freedom is I can be myself, and no matter what happens, like Jesus ultimately got my back. And if I die, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna still exist. I'm gonna be maybe hopefully in his arms. You know what I'm saying? And I have this certainty that I'm gonna be in his arms. And it sounds a little weird for some people who are unbelievers, but like there's this deep certainty that like I know if I would cease today, like he would pick me up. And that's just gives me a whole other level of freedom that I had before, because now I can maneuver life with a way bigger risk even, and taking risk for things that really stand for really for something good, because I don't have to fear death anymore so much. So I conquered pretty much, if I feel like once I conquered the fear of death with Jesus and he helped me, then I obviously just with him, and I feel like he took away like a lot of other fears as well. Like the social anxiety got less. All these concepts that I have to be really successful, these pressure thinking, that I have to be some type of person in order to be good. this validation seeking, the worthiness factor. He gives me my worthiness, he gives me validation. Like I feel like, and that's a very extreme thing also to say. And I don't know if I'm gonna be like that, but I feel like at this moment, if you put me on the street and take everything away from me, if I just have Jesus, like I'm gonna be fine because he gives me all the things that I pretty much need.
Amen. Yeah, amen. That's beautiful. And yeah, on your return to Christianity, what sort of, because you grew up in a Protestant context, and like we were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I was mentioning that I'm interested, like I'm a Protestant, but I like speaking to people within the Christian faith, whether they be Orthodox or Roman Catholic or
Mhm.
any kind of denomination within the Christian faith. What kind of drew you to Roman Catholicism, if you don't mind me asking? Like,
Yeah, sure,
because
sure. I think it's a very important discussion to have anyway, because at some point we should you should be united as Christians, even though we're diverse in some direction, right? To understand each other. Okay. I would say, first of all, there are two things, okay? Logical arguments and personal experience. I had a personal experience with the actual presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist and in the Last Supper, which they provide in the Catholic Church, where I went there and I was like, the same voice that was talking to me who's told me pray is the same voice that's telling me this is literally my body, right? It was really profound. I was like, whoa, whoa, and I was like, that's crazy, right? It was very real too. And until this point, and when I see the Eucharist, there's just something that's happening in my soul. And I was like, that's crazy, right? Okay, that's a personal experience, okay? And the second thing is, I'm a very rational person. For me, it's not enough to just feel good. I need to understand things. That's why when I encountered God, I needed to read the Bible. I needed to read all logical. I read all logical arguments for atheism and for theism. I literally read them all. And like in Wikipedia, you can read them. Like they're literally all listed there. It's like 40 or something. And I was like, that was after reading them and understanding them, they're not easy to understand. I was like, bro, theism is way better in the argument side. Like, oh my goodness, it's not even comparable. Like crazy. So then I was like, okay, I can logically and rationally believe that there's a God. Then I went also all the way resurrection. I listened to the arguments of Muslims and Christians debating each other and be like, who has the better arguments about the resurrection? Muslims say he didn't, and Christians say he did. And I was like, okay, the evidence for the resurrection is way stronger than anything else, right? The only reason I wouldn't believe in the resurrection is because I have I don't know how you say
presupposition.
presumption, yeah, presupposition that like miracles can't exist. But if you do say miracles can't exist because God exists, you suddenly realize this is the best accounted miracle in history. There's no other miracle like that. So okay, I have to do, okay, you know what I'm saying? So I'm a very rational person in that sense also. So then I went into the arguments for Protestantism versus Catholic Church. And one of the strongest arguments for me really was, first of all, I wanted to get to the closest possible to original church. And I think most people would nowadays agree that the original church was Catholic, right? And the Protestants separated later. They had already the concept of praying to Mary. They're like in old tombs of like old church, the first churches, there were like prayers to Mary and stuff like that recorded, which was like for me, okay, maybe praying to Mary is an actual thing. If the first church, like just 100 years or something after Christ, did already pray to Mary, right? Why do Protestants say you can't pray to Mary, right? So it started to be me like, okay, the original church, okay, focusing on that a little bit. The whole the whole succession of the apostles coming from the first apostles and all these things which are recorded was already strong arguments for me. And then there's another argument which was really strong for me as well. It's like, what did Jesus leave us? Jesus personally. Jesus personally, did he leave us the Bible or did he leave us a church? And he actually left us a church. When he was on the mountain with Peter, he said, here I will build my church. And the disciples then decided later to write it down and make scripture out of it, which is, of course, essential also for me as a Catholic. But for me as a Catholic, it's not just the Bible. It's not sola scriptura. It's he left a church and the church then wrote down the Bible, right? So then for me, it's important that I'm in the original church, if that makes any sense. This is the logical argument, plus two really, really strong things, which I personally believe that Protestants are not looking enough into, let's just say, is Mary apparitions. It's very hard to deny Mary apparitions. There are a lot of miracles happening in on those sides, like physical healings that are beyond any imagination. like crazy stuff, right? There's a lot of eyewitness testimony of like seeing Mary actually there, and not just the person who claims to have apparitions. Sometimes there are some accounts of thousands of people seeing Mary at the same time. Some see just a silhouette, some see just like little things. So it's very, very difficult. If you dig into the evidence of Mary apparitions, there's like the famous miracle of the sun. I don't know if you heard of it in Fatima, Portugal. It was a Mary apparition back then, and she announced on that day and that hour, I will perform a miracle, so you believe in my apparition. And she did, and there were like 100, I'm not sure, I guess 100,000 people roughly, and all of them saw it. Even the press wrote about it. Like, I just think if we really look into this stuff, it's very hard to deny. I'm not saying it's impossible. Some people say it's from the demon, which I think is a complete nonsense argument, because the demon would never say follow Jesus, go to church and pray regularly. That's just stupid. Okay, so we have the Mary apparitions, which is a very, very strong case for me for the Catholic Church. And then we have the Eucharistic miracles. So I personally felt something. And then afterwards, I was like, let's research about the Eucharist. And it's not the topic that is talked much about, but they're like, if I'm not mistaken, and I asked that ChatGPT, so I could be wrong, they're like 1,500 Eucharistic miracles. So Eucharistic miracle is anything where the Eucharist does something out of the ordinary. So sometimes the Eucharist, the tabernacle, so the place where the Eucharist is stored, shines with bright light, right? Stuff like that that doesn't make any sense. Sometimes the Eucharist was with the hosts, they were consecrated, always consecrated hosts. Were put in the river for like, I don't know, they were looking for them for days or weeks even, and they found them, and the bread was still like, it didn't make any sense. Everything was wet, but the bread didn't soak up the bread, like stuff that doesn't make sense, right? Other stuff is one of my favorite miracles is the miracle in Buenos Aires, 1996. I'm not sure if it was when the Eucharist fell on the floor. I guess I'm not sure the circumstance. Could be another one that I'm citing right now. I read a lot of them. And it fell on the floor. And then when it falls on the floor, they don't give it to that person anymore. So they put it somewhere else. They put it in like a piece of paper, and they just put it somewhere else. Then the piece of paper started to have blood, and it was like really weird. And there's a lot of blood, by the way, in all these miracles. And they sent this blood to like atheistic laboratories. Okay. I don't know if you're still there because your camera is off.
I am still here. I don't know why it's been
Okay.
doing that. I'm really sorry. I need to fix that. I think it times out. There must be a setting I can change. Sorry, please continue.
No worry, no worries. So, okay, they sent this blood sample of this, what's appeared on the Eucharist. And by the way, there's many, many Eucharistic miracles with also blood samples. And they always sent them to laboratories and to ask them, what is that? What type of blood is that? And it's human blood, so it's not animal blood. And these are atheistic laboratories, which is gonna get into that later. And they say it's human blood. It has always the same blood type. It's always AB positive. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert. AB something. It says it's fragments of a human heart, even. So, in order for that to be just like cutting your thumb and putting it there, no, no, no. It would have to be an actual human heart that is the blood from there, right? That's just already insane. Next part is the blood is still alive, which doesn't make any sense, because if you have blood on air, in a matter of a few minutes, it just dries up. But the blood that they sent to the laboratory, they say it's still alive. It has a lot of, and then it has a lot of white blood cells, which says something like it's a person that is in distress. Okay, it's pretty much they pretty much termed it, even in some Eucharistic miracle. It looks like a person that's so much in distress that they're about to die. So, and another one, and that's one that's very crazy, is like they find one chromosome. Like they don't find X, Y, and XX. I'm not sure about that one. I didn't research enough, but I heard that one. And that is also like consistent with the virgin birth, right? Because there's no male semen injection. They were like, that's really weird. We only find one chromosome. What's going on there, right? And then come the priests to these laboratories. They show them the host, and they say that, and like atheistic scientists converted to Catholicism afterwards, because they were like, oh my goodness, that's strong evidence. You know what I'm saying? So I guess these are the main things. The arguments, the personal experience, the Eucharistic miracles, and the Mary apparitions are just something that I just can't feel honest when denying it. I just can't anymore. I can't deny it anymore. That's just my stance on this.
That's really interesting. I really appreciate you going into such detail with your answer. I can already feel my majority Protestant listener base getting ready to comment. And I just want to say that I think
Cool.
like, look, we need to be able to have conversations about these kind of things Like, if you're a Protestant and you disagree with Roman Catholicism, you should at least hear from a Roman Catholic what they believe. Like, don't strawman their arguments, you know? So, I'm so passionate, like we were talking about before, about being able to speak as brothers and sisters in Christ, even if we're in different Christian traditions. And that's really interesting. I hadn't heard most of that. So that's something I need to look into for myself. My cousin's a Catholic. She sent me a book called like Rome Sweet Home. And I've heard a lot of Catholics talking about that, so maybe I should give that a read. I should at least know what my Catholic brothers and sisters believe. So I'm really interested in doing that. I know you had something on after this, so I do want to respect your time. Um, how
I'm
about
good,
we
by the way, so
you're
okay.
still good? All right, that's good. As long as we're doing okay for time. What else would you like to say? One of the other things that I often get people to do is to just kind of speak to somebody that was in a position similar to the one that they were in before they came to
Hmm.
Christ. So if somebody's listening and maybe they're feeling empty, they've pursued worldly success, maybe they've got girls and money now, but they're still feeling like there's something missing. What would you say to somebody that's in that position?
Hmm. I love this quote from Saint Augustine, and I would like to pull it up. So maybe you can cut that afterwards because I need a second.
Yeah, no, no, take your time, please. That's no worries at all. That's another thing I'll just talk while you're pulling up the quote. Another thing that I've been interested in as I continue to listen to my Roman Catholic friends and my Eastern Orthodox friends is the constant appeals to people in the early church and the early church fathers, which is something I think is really cool. I think we as Protestants need to see what the early church believed and maybe connect with that a little bit more. And yeah, so I appreciate you pulling up Augustine as somebody that's obviously a huge figure in church history. Yeah, what did you have to say, brother?
Sure, sure. Very inspirational guy anyway. He also lived a lot in the world and then he found God. So for anyone who's listening, who's in the world right now, this guy did it all. Like he went up the ranks like in politics. He had so much power in politics. He was like under the king or something like that, or the ruler at that time. He had all the women that he wanted. He had family even, but he left his family for like even more power and all these things. So he was really up. And then he converted. Strong conversion. He then went to be one of the biggest church fathers in history, actually. So it's a pretty awesome story. Nice movie also about that. He said something along the lines. No, he said actually that in his confessions, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you."
Amen.
That's pretty much my life experience, and I think that's everyone hours of life experience. Like it's literally impossible to reach a 10 out of 10 fulfillment on this earth. Like whatever you achieve, like you're gonna have maybe peaks, maybe you're gonna feel 9 of 10, maybe 9.5. But like there's always something. There's always something. There's always something missing. And usually if we're honest, our daily experience is like a 6 or a 7 of 10, right? And and being with Christ, first of all, averaged me like on an 8, which is crazy. Like this is nuts. Okay. Being average 8, I know this is insane. And I know how blessed I am from God for that. But averaging an 8 is insane. But first of all, and most importantly, like there's nothing on this world that gets us to a 10 out of 10 because we are made for God. We are souls that are longing for God. Like like you can try to find it. You can continue your journey trying to find to this person who's listening. You can continue trying to find it. But like there's no way you will ever feel safe if you don't know where you came from, if you don't know who you really are, and if you don't know where you're going. If any of those three is missing, and if you can't answer any of those three, you're per definition lost. Per definition, lost means you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. If you don't know any of those three, you're lost. So the only one that I found personally that really answers all these questions to level beyond satisfaction, even, is Christ. Like he tells you where you came from. You were a soul created before you were in the womb. He knew you already. He's the only one who gives you real identity. You're like a child of God. That's what you really are. A beloved child of God. That's your identity. That's what you are. Whatever else you think is like on top, but that's your identity. And he tells you where you're going, which is obviously if you make the right decisions with him again and in heaven again, and then you get full fulfillment again. It answers all the questions of suffering for me. Like I haven't found like Buddha is trying to avoid suffering. Buddha is just saying get rid of all the attachments from this world, get rid of all these attachments, then you don't have any suffering anymore. He's pretty much saying, go in a cave and meditate the whole day. This way you won't have any suffering, which is a silly way to live life. Life doesn't work like that. There is suffering in this life. And Christ is the only one who solves it. He's the only one who gives us an actual purpose. He's like, your suffering is your salvation. Your cross is your salvation. So he's the only one, like I also love this quote, like atheists, they don't solve anything. They just rob you the hope. Like the only thing that atheism solves, they don't solve anything, literally. They don't solve any of the difficult questions here. They just rob you the most beautiful thing that there is, which is the hope for something better. And Christ is the only one who, and I'm not saying that only, like you said, just to feel good. There's a lot of evidence that Christ talks the truth, like Christ is the truth. So my personal suggestion would be open your heart and just ask him to enter, man, because that's all it takes. Like they used to call it the good news, the gospel, right? Because the good news is you just have to accept it. You just have to open your heart, and that's it. Like you don't have, there's no merit involved. It's not a merit-based religion. It's like open your heart, accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. Obviously, afterwards, your fruits have to be good, but like that's it, just open your heart, ask him to fill yourself, ask him to come into your life, be sincere about it. Don't be like this hypocrite who says, yeah, but I asked already Jesus to come in life, but your heart was like stone. That doesn't work. It's a heart issue, it's not a mental issue. You can't just say the words while you're still full of pride, full of I can do it better, I don't need any God. Any of that energy, any of that state, he can't work with that because you're literally rejecting him. If you say, I can do it myself, my will, not your will be done, but my will be done, you're pretty much rejecting God. So how can he? He won't force himself upon you. He will never do that. That's
Thank
just some words in that sense.
No, that's good. There's a lot of wisdom in that, absolutely. And I'm sure that people that have been listening to you speak over the last, half an hour, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever it's been, really want to keep up with your work, keep up with your life, as your story continues to unfold with God. I'm looking at your Instagram right now. Is your Instagram still the best place for people to find you? I see you've got a link there to a
Yeah.
blog. Because
Not
I'll
so active on the blog right
not
now,
so active.
but I am definitely, I want to make something more on Instagram. So it's a good place to see where I'm heading, even though
Awesome.
I'm sometimes like trying to stay away from all these social media stuff because it's just, you know, you know how it is, right?
Totally. Yeah. No, it can be draining. It's hard when you are passionate about creating content and reaching people, but then also knowing when to sort of take a step back because definitely you can become involved to the point where it's counterproductive to be on social media like all the
True.
time. I definitely feel you there. So I'm going to link people to your Instagram so that they can find you and kind of keep up with what you're doing. That's the best place for
Sure.
them
And any
to.
question, like I'm currently in a time of my life where I do only faith work. I'm very blessed to do that. Friend helping me out for that. Like for 2 months, we're just literally focusing on faith questions. And so if anyone has literally any questions, like now is a great time to ask me because I don't have any other projects to attend to. So go ahead and ask me on Instagram.
That's awesome. Well, Patrick, yeah, I'm gonna wrap the recording part up there. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm really really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and being able to get into a few topics that I like to kind of nerd out on in my own spare time too. So yeah, thank you again, brother, for coming on. Everyone, if you've been blessed by the video at all, if you found value in what you've heard, liking, subscribing, all those boring things people always ask you to do, it does genuinely make a difference. It helps get that video out to far more people and share Patrick's story with a broader audience. So we'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Go check Patrick out on Instagram. Yeah, you can find his link in the description box below, depending on the platform you're listening to this on. And you can find all of my links there too. So thanks for listening and thank you again for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing.